Today, I'm going to show you how I built a custom walnut cross for a local church and installed the most expensive LEDs I've ever seen. This project is not only the icon and source of comfort for an entire religion, but also will be the centerpiece for this church's investment in their upgraded sanctuary, and I am humbled at the opportunity to build it for them. I spent a fair amount of time just staring at the lumber for inspiration, looking for a pattern with symmetry that wasn't too busy and wasn't too boring. They want this cross to be about a foot taller than the architect recommended, so I needed to do a little math to make sure everything was proportioned correctly. Once that was sorted, I got straight to work cutting down the lumber for the front face. I go into more detail on how I straighten these longer boards in the first video of this series, the communion table. If you haven't checked it out, I'll drop a link in the description. But essentially, I'm just using this Craig AccuCut XL to get one straight edge that I can use as a reference to cut the long boards on the table saw. As a variation on that technique, for shorter boards, you can use the jointer to flatten one side and then use that as the reference edge to get your straight cut on the table saw. For this build, I want the patibulum to rest inside the stipes. Do what? You might be asking yourself. But it turns out the vertical and horizontal parts of the cross have actual names. The stipes is the vertical, and the patibulum is the horizontal. Anyway, I want the patibulum to rest inside the stipes for this build, and to do that, I'm going to use a cross lap joint. I want the cross to be as thick as it is wide, so I'm ripping 4-inch wide strips that I'll use to box in the back. I'm using aluminum channel with diffusers to give a nice, polished look to the glow of the LEDs. To accommodate that, I'll need to cut a nearly 1-inch groove on the inside of all faces with a dado blade. I'm using pocket holes and glue just to make sure everything stays together long term. Sometimes you'll find small gaps or inconsistencies in the joints, and for those, I like to grab a little cup of sawdust from the dust collector, then with a small amount of glue, rub sawdust in those gaps so that it matches. Somewhere between 80 grit and 180 grit. I also like to spray projects down with water to make the grain stand up. But it also gives you a sneak preview of what that finished piece is going to look like. The customer specifically requested a 45-degree chamfered edge for the front face. The palm router worked great for the main edges, but I'd have to hand chisel the corners. I wanted to get a few coats of finish on the inside of the cross before installing the lights, primarily to avoid accidentally dripping anything on the electronics. Once that was dry, I started the lights for the first time. The lights really should have been the easiest part of this build, but I ended up having to redo them 3 times. As you can see here, the first set was defective and wouldn't stay the same color. The second set worked fine and looked great, but the project manager insisted that they be replaced with what residential electricians use. So I moved the cross to my office for a few weeks while we waited on the replacements, and in the meantime, fired up the CNC to cut the mounting brackets. But the router on the CNC died halfway through, so I had to cut out that last one with the miter saw. When the new lights showed up, I carefully set the cross on the bench and started removing the light covers and tape lights. This second set of tape lights had really thin backing that just shredded as I started pulling them out. And if you've ever wondered what almost $900 worth of LED tape lights looks like, here it is. These were graciously donated to the church by a local electrical company and included a Wi-Fi and DMX controller. The tape lights themselves were in 1-foot sections and required individual bridge connectors, but they were also at least 3 to 4 times as thick and rigid as the previous tape lights. This meant they wouldn't be nearly as flexible and required that I drill an additional hole to route them through without twisting. I installed the mounting hardware with captive bolts inside the channels I'd grooved out with the CNC. The idea with this design is that I can just set them into the brackets I'd pre-mounted and then be able to slide it left to right to be sure it's centered. Next, I started installing the new lights. It's important to note that these lights have arrows printed on the tapes, and you must ensure that all arrows are pointing the same direction. Additionally, the control wire must be plugged into the side all the arrows are facing away from. And that is how I built a backlit walnut cross. I'm pretty proud of this one. I was challenged by the build, it turned out beautifully, and the customers loved it. And it's my hope that it be a blessing to their community for generations to come. Thanks for watching.